Hello, this is an introduction to the Assess practical called Unit 3, and the aim of this video is to give you a good understanding of how the unit is assessed. Unit 3 is 20% of the overall mark for AS Physics, the other 80% being awarded to Unit 1 and Unit 2, the theory modules, which are examined in May. Unit 3 is also externally marked, so all of the work is sent off to the examiners in May. Now this year the case study for the Assess practical is the acceleration due to gravity, and this theme will be running through the three sections of the practical, which we're going to go through in detail now. So the three sections are called Section A, Section B, and the third is really two minor sections, but they're grouped together, and this is the actual practical section, C and D. These names are referred to in the criteria, which we'll go through in a second. Before we do that, we're going to look at the timing. So after you come back from half term, you have 1 week of theory, ordinary lessons, and then on the 5th of March everybody sits the plan together in the main hall at 3 o'clock. I'll explain details about that in a second. The following week and the week after that are the times when the practical assessment is actually carried out, and what will happen is that you will be doing one double lesson in either the first or the second week. The reason for this is that we don't have enough space in the lab for all 24 students to do the practical at the same time, so half will do it in the first week between the 10th and the 13th of March, and the other half will do it in the second week between the 17th and the 20th. In the week that you're not doing a practical, you'll be set some work to do. So that's the double period where you do the practical, and then there's a week free, and then on the 2nd of April is the last stage. This is the deadline for what's called the summary, and that's the piece of research. So the order is that we do the plan first, then we do the practical, and then you hand in the research on the 2nd of April. Now, a useful place to go to find information is the AS Physics VLE, and there is a unit section on the Unit 3 VLE page dedicated to the Assess practical, and in that folder you will find a number of samples of work that have been scanned. They are work of previous students who have done this practical 2 or 3 years ago, so you can get an idea of how you write the research, how you write the plan, and how you write the practical up. There are also other bits of information. Advice for Students is a document written by Edexcel, and it tells you how you should phrase certain statements, the sort of wording you should use. The briefing sheet you should all have a copy of now. That is this one. I'll show you that on here. So everyone should now have a copy of the AS briefing sheet, and other information that you can find on the VLE page are a couple of PowerPoints, one of them being the AS practical criteria. This is a breakdown of the criteria marks, and I'm going to talk about what those criteria are in a second, but a more detailed explanation is given in this PowerPoint. So I would recommend that you spend some time here, and what we're going to do now is look at Unit 3 criteria. This is really your main reference for what the marks are awarded for. So let's have a look at that now. So the criteria, and you'll have a copy of this document at all times, so you have a copy of it now. You are allowed to bring it into the plan exam, and you're allowed to bring it into the practical in your double lesson, so you always have access to this document. The three sections, beginning with A, summary of the case study. This is the 9 marks that are awarded for the piece of research. The criterion for each mark is stated here, but sometimes they're not that clear, and students often say, what does it mean by a certain criteria? First thing to do is to look at the PowerPoint that we've created with a bit more information on each one. Then have a look at the student work from the past to see how they tackled it, and then if you've still got problems, come and ask at a subject extension. But there's plenty of time to get to grips with these criteria. But section A is the last one that you hand in, so for now we're going to move on to the next section, which is section B, which is for the plan that you'll be sitting on the 5th of March. Now the plan is handwritten. Obviously you're in an exam in the hall, but you're allowed to prepare this in advance. So while you're at home or in the library at college, you can work through all of these criteria marks and work out what it is you're going to write for each one. And then once you've done that, make sure that you can write out a clear plan at home. When you come in to do the exam on the 5th of March, you're not allowed to bring in any of your prepared work. You're just given the criteria and the briefing sheet, and you have to write your plan from memory, if that's how you like to do it. But that plan is worth 14 marks out of 40, so around about a third. Once the plan's been written, you will be given that back as a photocopy when you come to do your practical, because your practical is based on your own plan. When you come to do the practical itself, you'll be working on, first of all, section C. There are 4 marks, and this is really for recording data and how you record your data in tables accurately and with appropriate significant figures and so on. Once you've got your data, you then carry straight on with the analysis. So this is things like plotting the graph accurately, labelling the axes, putting a line of best fit through the points, and so on. And this section C and D will take a double lesson. There is then another section E here, which is really, I think it should have been, Edexcel probably meant to add this to section A, because it only refers to the summary. So there's another couple of marks that are awarded for lack of spelling errors and clear grammar and so on. Okay, so the criteria are how you get your marks. You have got to get a total of 40 to get full marks. It's well within the reach of all students to get 40 out of 40. Where students don't get 40 out of 40 is where they don't understand the criteria properly, and so their wording is inappropriate, so they might not use the correct technical terms, and the markers are very strict about what they will allow and what they won't. But there's plenty of time to get this right. Okay, so let's have a look now at an example of a plan to see what exactly you have to do here. So here is a plan that was written which scored 37 out of 40, so it's a pretty good one. We'll just go back to the top and we'll rotate that round. That first section is the examiner's cover sheet, but this is the start of the plan. So this has been written by the student in about an hour and a half. This is how long you have in the plan exam, and you can see in this case what the student's done is that they have labelled the criteria marks throughout the plan, so P14 up here, P13 and so on. And that's quite good practice, because it means you can check that you have actually included all of the criteria marks in your work. This piece of work has been marked, and on the right hand side you can see this is an examiner's comment. P13 means that the examiner has seen enough for P13. If we look at P13 just to see what it is, then you can see, we'll just go back up one page, P13 says draws an appropriately labelled diagram of the apparatus to be used, and so that was quite clearly drawn in there. Here we are. So this is the apparatus. It doesn't need to be a masterpiece, it just needs to be something that clearly shows exactly what was done in order to carry out the practical. And you should practice drawing your diagrams. Depending on obviously what you're doing, you may need other equipment to show what measurements you took. In this case, a micrometer and a stopwatch were used, but in other cases you might find there be meter rules, set squares, a number of other things, so you have to be careful about what you need to include. If we quickly go through the plan, we can see then that the student has added in other criteria marks all the way through, and the examiner has marked on the right hand side where he or she thinks those marks have been awarded, and so on. All the P numbers for the plan are shown there, and then eventually we get to the point where the student, this page here is now where the student started to record the data. So this sheet is the first one of the practical assessment work. There are 4 marks awarded for just recording data and carrying it out. You have to have the correct headings. Your data must be consistent in each column, so if you use 2 decimal places for recording diameter, you must follow that all the way down to the bottom. And you can see here that this student has made a mistake in this value because they've written 103 and they should have written 103.0. So the examiner has deducted a mark for inconsistency. So very clear about what you have to include if you're going to get all the marks. So this is the recording of data, and then we go on to really the analysis, and the graph is at the end. We'll have a look at that in a minute, but this is all about saying what was done, looking at the data to find out if there were any uncertainties. Now uncertainties is all about how well do we know the value that we've calculated, and we need to practice that, so there will be some time spent showing you how to do this. Okay, so we're almost getting through to the end there. The student finishes off calculating a value for, in this case it was viscosity, and so on, and then right at the end we've got the graph, which I'll just turn that around so we can view it. Okay, so in this graph what you can see is on the left hand side you've got a labelled scale with the velocity recorded in meters per second. On the horizontal scale we've got radius squared, and the student made a mistake here because they didn't put meters squared, and so that would have lost a mark for the graph. So there are an awful lot of things that you can slip up on if you're not careful, but usually if you've had enough time to prepare and you're thinking carefully about what you're doing, you should have no problems. So in this case the students lost A1 over here, but they've got the others, and the other marks are given for a range of things such as a careful plotting of the data. One thing that's done that you should be aware of is that 3 points, and that's why there's a tick shown on, usually there are 3 data points. I can see there's the third one up there. What the examiner does is they pick the three points at random, or the 3 that are furthest from the line of best fit, and they check the data to see if it matches up with the data table. So the points must be plotted accurately, and if those points are not accurate then you lose the plotting mark. So what we've seen there is the plan and the practical write-up, all done written by hand. Now what we're going to look at now is section A. This is an example of the summary, and so you can see immediately this is a word processed piece of work. We'll go back to the top. So the case study on viscosity in industry, well, we'll be doing the case study on acceleration due to gravity. What you have to do is to choose some aspect of the acceleration due to gravity that you're interested in. The background information on the briefing sheet talks about a number of examples of where G is important. So it might be in geology, or it could be in space travel. So you have to pick something that you're interested in that you can write about. You also have to include a method for finding the value of G, and where you come across the term physics principles, that means something that includes a physics equation. So you must include some physics equation in your summary. If we just go through it, you'll see that there is some good this is a good example of a write-up. So first of all, the headings are very clear. Reading this, you know exactly what you're reading. It's quite clear that there are headings there that take you through it nice and steadily. There are marks awarded for correct use of terminology and spelling of technical terms, so you must make sure you get those right. You get a mark for a data table or graph, so you don't have to obtain this data yourself, just obtain the table of data, or a graph or something that you found that is that meets the criteria. And as you see on the right hand side, you can see where the examiner has given the summary marks, S1 to S9. So we'll jump down to the bottom, and this last page of the summary is really important. It's telling you that the students added a bibliography, which you must do, but you have to make sure that you use 3 different types of source. So in this case we've used a book, in fact 2 books, website and a magazine. The book, the website and the magazine are 3 different types of source. That's the crucial thing. You can't just use 3 different websites because they only count as one type of source. The other thing to do is that you must make a full reference to the source, so which pages you refer to, the title, the author, the date of publication. If it's a website, you should say the date that you last accessed that page, so as much detail as possible. The other 2 marks here, summary 1 and 2, have been awarded because of this bibliography. So I would suggest, if you go back to the VLE folder, you'll see other examples of student work in here, and obviously they're on a different theme, a different case study to the one you're working on, but they are extremely important as ways of finding out how to answer the criteria. So a couple of other little things just to mention. If we just look at the summary page that we were just looking at a moment ago, this is approximately 1,000 words. It doesn't really matter too much what you do, as long as it's not 5,000 would be way too many, a couple of hundred would be far too small. Edexcel recommended originally that it was about 600, but they soon realised that that wasn't really a high enough figure, so they have relaxed that, and you can now within reason go up to, say, probably 1,500 would be just fine. Most students end up somewhere around the 1,000 word mark, plus or minus a few hundred, so don't worry about this. This is not something that you'll be marked down on. If you want to get information from a wide range of sources, the library has an excellent set of resources for searching online. Don't forget that just because something's online doesn't mean to say it's a web page. So an article that has been archived in a database, something like New Scientist for example here, that counts as a magazine article, even though you may have gone to a website in order to retrieve it. Okay, so the key thing is to be well prepared, start off by getting your plan organised first, because you now know what your title of the project is. You're going to be determining a value for the acceleration due to gravity using conservation of energy. So you know what you're going to be doing, so you now know how to plan that. You have to think carefully about all the equipment you'll need in order to carry out that plan, or in order to write the plan, so that you can then get the full marks for the implementation, measurement and analysis. If there are any problems, then any of the teachers will be happy to answer questions. Last final point that's really important is that we cannot mark a draft of any of the work that has to be submitted. So whilst the teacher can be used as though they were a resource, in other words, you can ask the teacher for advice on the physics or on the meaning of criteria and so on, you can't submit work for the teacher to give you advice on whether this meets the criteria or not. That's one of the rules in the specification. So by all means ask lots of questions, but there can't be any work submitted as drafts, and all work is done once only and then submitted to Edexcel. So good luck with that. There's plenty of help and resources in the VLE page. If there's anything else you need, just ask. Okay, good luck.